From Evoke Media, I'm Sabrina Mirage Naeem. With me is Cassia Binkowski, and this is Breaking Glass, a series of conversations with women around the world who are shattering glass ceilings and challenging social norms. They are audacious, gutsy, and their stories are echoed across borders and generations in a rallying cry that is changing the narrative for women everywhere. Today we're headed to Ireland to speak with Ifrah Ahmed. We're talking about an incredibly complex and sensitive issue, female genital mutilation. Ifrah, originally from Somalia, talks about her experience as a young girl being cut, the pervasive culture of FGM in her home country and around the world, and her public activism to end the practice.
Sabrina, you're absolutely right. This is a global issue. More than 200 million girls and women alive today have undergone female genital mutilation, and yet Ifrah really bridges a cultural gap for us. She takes this global issue and shares a deeply personal story.
True, and the thing that I took away from this conversation was how complex this issue really is. It's easy to think about it as being very black and white, right or wrong, but there are numerous repercussions to consider. It's a very dangerous procedure. There are long-term physical and mental health implications, and still it has been passed on from generation to generation.
Today's conversation is sensitive, it's eye-opening, and it's one that every single one of us can learn something from. Take a listen.
Ifrah, thank you so much for joining us. We're really looking forward to diving into your pretty extraordinary story. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we want to talk about a lot with you, but where we like to usually begin is the root of the story, which is really your childhood. You're in Ireland today, but you grew up in Somalia, and we want to understand a little bit from you about what it was like growing up as a girl in Somalia.
Well, Somalia, is East African country. Somali people, they're very nice people and they're very humble, and we are very traditional, like Irish, because Ireland, people, they are just close and they're together and friendly. So Somalia is like that. But 1991, Somalia, there's a war breakdown. And since then, Somalia became one of the most dangerous places in the world, I would say. So I grew up with my grandmother and a lot of other kids, because Somalia also love having a big family. So there was a bunch of people around, and we all grew up with my grandmother, and we were just kids when the war break. And then I don't really know nothing about, I didn't know anything. Now I know, of course, because I came to Ireland, I educated, I went back. But growing up in Somalia, I see only blood and rape and, killing, and that's it. But now, where I see, when I go back to Somalia, I can go to the beach, I can meet with people, I can get a lot of different foods, I can see pictures, even, knowing the flag and all that. But when I was kid, we didn't understand anything, and it's not something that family explained. But when I was baby, I remember loving this traditional face mask that all the women and the big sister does. And I remember stealing and putting on my face and trying to be a big girl and all that. And my grandmother never liked it. So I used to be in trouble one bit. And I think, for me, growing up in Somalia, there was nothing to talk apart of bomb and killing and all that. So, yeah, it's really hard.
So that we're going to talk a little bit about you having to flee the country during war in a minute, but you're touching on something that I think we wanted to understand also was, what was it like for women around you at the time? What opportunities or lack thereof did you see for yourself growing up in terms of marriage, education, occupation? Was there a clear understanding for girls and women in the country at the time that there would be opportunities for you when you grew up?
No, because as I said, that the only thing you see is blood and killing and rape. So when you're in a situation where you are in your family home and then you see a man with a gun, and then maybe you had the last food at home or last money to buy food, and this military, they've gun pointed with grandmother or any of other adults to take the money and all that. So when you're living in that situation, it's very hard to think of or even make a decision of what kind of life you want to live. So um, I never know any of that.
Did you, I mean, what was the day to day like? Did you get the chance to go to school? Was that an opportunity for you? The violence started when you were very, very young, as you said, and you didn't leave the country until you were in a teenager. So what was that in between period like?
Just running around from bomb attack, and what I know is just seeing military with guns and people killed and all sort of different things, and also being afraid to go out because of the risk of being killed or anything. So it just I was lucky to be living the country.
When you were 8 years old, you were cut in Somalia, which is a practice that is very common, particularly in that country, but in many countries around the world. Can you take us back to that day? What can you share about your experience?
Well, what I can share is I always describe that, first thing I remember is the sound of the scissor when it actually goes clicks. And when I close my eyes, I just feel the pain because, uh, I remember, like even if you hurt yourself or something, or if you go on operation, you get for anti-pain or anesthetic. But imagine when you are cut with poiled scissors and blades and things like that, and then somebody having a noodles, which is really big, and just sewing, like sewing machine, sewing your own clothes. So I remember all those traumas, and I remember my grandmother was holding me and seeing, this man cutting and seeing blood everywhere. And also, I was not the only person. I was one of many girls that who were cut. So I was one of the 9 girls who were cut, and I remember really when my grandmother was holding me so tight, and this man was doing cutting the whole things and sewing, like he's sewing clothes or he's just sewing something else. So um, it was not really good memory, and it's it's really painful even to talk about, because when people talk, they talk about the differences of FGM. But when I talk about the whole thing is same, because these scissors, there are three different scissors, and oh my God, it's so difficult. And imagine like scissors and what they call laser blade, everything after use a couple of girls is being washed and boiled with hot water and use it same to the other girls, and seeing all that and the blood, and then again your legs being tied it for 40 days. That is another uh, you know painful, because you have to sit straight for 40 days.
As a little girl?
Yeah, as a